Welcome, everybody. My name is Kathy Yuan. I'm with Phase One Design, and today I'll be the moderator for the event. We're really excited to share with you our webinar today, which is Boost Your ROI with MLI Select. So as I'm sure you all know, everybody's familiar with the CMHC MLI Select program to some degree. The focus of today's webinar is to ensure that you leave with a really good, intimate knowledge of how the program works and if it's a right fit for you. Financing is obviously like a very key part of any successful project, specifically to do with, the small scale multifamily projects that you see so much throughout Calgary on RCG lots, HCO lots and MC zoned lots. But that being said, we have actually assembled a whole team of experts here today, not only to talk about the finance piece, but we will also touch on the entire process start to finish, because obviously financing is part of a much larger picture, and we just want to make sure everybody leaves with a really good knowledge of how to do a project successfully from start to finish. Diane, do you mind going to the next slide, please? All right, so here is, I'm not going to read all these out, but these are all the topics that today we are going to cover in the webinar. So what we're going to do, we have about a 15-minute presentation from all our different speakers today. And then at the end of it, what we're going to do is an open Q&A from the audience. And also if you at any point in time, kind of want to deep dive a bit more, if you have a specific project or, like a very, very specific question to do with your specific situation, like, as you know, everyone's financial situation is different, how they finance it, even their projects are very different. We encourage you to book a strategy session. We have this QR code that's on the bottom right-hand corner of every slide. So if you want to book a one-on-one session with us, we are doing those as a complimentary session for any attendees after. We will also be making this presentation available online after, so we'll be sending a link to all the participants. So if you miss a slide or something like that, we will always send that out after. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce the first speaker here. So our first speaker is Ahmed Hatata. We're super lucky to have him here today. He has 15 years of commercial mortgage broker experience, 13 years doing real life investing for his own projects and development. And I just actually found this out today. So he was actually nominated for 4 years in a row as a CMA Canadian Broker of the Year commercial, including this year. So we're super lucky to have him. And, we kind of jokingly behind the scenes call him the encyclopedia of all the finance to do with these types of projects. So we're super lucky to have him here today. I meant that as a compliment, Ahmed. He will be deep diving into the CMHC program. So take it away, Ahmed.
All right. Thank you, Kathy, for this great introduction. And welcome, everyone. I'm very excited to share some knowledge, and hopefully everyone can get what they need out of this today. We can get to the next slide, please, to get started. Awesome. So CMHC, their multifamily program has actually existed for a very long time. Recently, it's gotten very popular because of the MLI Select that came out March 2022. So the standard program that existed for as long as I've been in the industry for, that one was really cool as well. So, and I'm going to talk about the differences of the two and how MLI is just a little bit more superior. And that's why it's attracting a lot of investors, and it's solving a lot of rental affordability issues that we're having. So standard, the difference was in the standard CMHC multifamily, you can only get up to 40-year amortization, as opposed to MLI Select now up to, if you qualify up to the 100-point system, you get 50-year amortization. Under the standard, previously it was 85% loan to value. That was the maximum you can purchase or refinance at. And today with MLI Select, which is the big thing, is it's 95% loan to value. So these two are the biggest differences in the program. There are other smaller differences. Well, not so small like the premium differences. We get a discounted CMHC premium under the MLI Select as opposed to the standard. And what I mean by premium, you know how when you buy a house at 5% down, we're talking just residential terms, CMHC tax on a premium on the mortgage amount. So it's the same thing in the commercial multifamily sense, is that CMHC will still tack on a premium at funding. You don't have to pay that upfront. It is just added to your approved loan amount, and it's amortized on your approved amortization period, which is up to 50 years. So that's the main differences of the two. And we'll go on to the next slide to dive in a little deeper. So the program offerings, as mentioned, amortization, huge thing, 50 years, up to 50 years. Loan to value, up to 95%. So LTV, short in financial term for loan to value. LTC, anybody here that's into construction, pay attention to that because it's not to be mistaken with LTV. LTC is loan to cost. So that will be based on your budget. So if you're a builder and you're building, whether it's for CMHC or for anything, the lenders will use terms like LTC, so loan to cost. So that's 95% of your budget. CMHC premiums, as mentioned, MLI Select, when it first came out, it used to be a 1% CMHC premium. But today they increased that last year to 2.55% and up to 2.8%. So the difference is if CMHC funds and everything is rented, you pay 2.55%. But CMHC will actually fund without all the units being rented, which is really cool. They'll just go off the appraisal, which will have an estimated market income. So if they say, okay, you know, these units are going to be rented for $2,000 a month, CMHC will just use that for a future income, and then you'll pay the higher premium, which is not too bad, 2.8 versus 2.55. And of course, the most important thing to qualify for CMHC multifamily, you need to have 5 legal suites. So if you have, so the smallest example, Edmonton is really popular for that because they allow both basement suites and garage suites. So you have a side-by-side duplex with legal basement suites. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. And on top of the garage, there's a 5th one. So that 5th legal unit is the key to enter to the CMHC program with their minimum requirement of 5. So, and then there's no limit after that. You can have a 300 unit apartment building. That's no problem. CMHC does require the entire building because they want to be in control of the entire common area, because that's how they qualify all these loans. So you can't have a 200 unit building and give them 199 units. No, they need the whole thing. MLI Select. There are 3 categories that you can use to qualify for MLI Select. So MLI Select, as mentioned, that's where you get the extra 50-year amortization, 95% loan to value, and better premiums. Now to qualify, the 3 categories, affordability, which is the most popular, and we'll dive into that one later. Energy, which basically building or renovating a building to accommodate the energy modeling, either federal or sometimes, depending on the province or municipality, they have their own energy code. So it's a little more complicated, obviously, the energy one. And then the last one is accessibility. So basically building a building, a townhouse, apartments, whatever, to accommodate handicapped accessible, so ramps, maybe bathrooms with handles and things like that. So those are the 3 categories, just very lightly, briefly touched on those. And we'll go to the next slide to speak a little bit more in detail about affordability, which is definitely the most popular one that we have seen and the one that we're financing the most. because it's the easiest to achieve, especially in Calgary and Edmonton. So how to qualify under affordability. So, let's think this picture on the bottom here of the 4 townhouses. This is probably going to be the most popular structure that you see right now that most of the builders are building or the investors are buying. So what you see here is 2-story townhouse and with a basement, and the basement is legal. So that makes it 4 plus 4, that's 8 units. That qualifies under CMHC. Now for affordability, here's the item. You need for you to qualify under affordability, 25% of the units have to be rented at the affordability rate. So CMHC has decided, based on their own data, that the affordability rate is going to be 30% of the median income of Albertans. Long story short, that number is around $1,735 a month. You cannot rent a unit more than that. And we need to give CMHC 15% to 25% of the units to qualify. So that's why building basement suites in Calgary, as far as I know, you can't really rent a basement suite for more than $1,600, $1,700 a month. So when you tell CMHC, okay, I'm going to give you 3 of the units, I will rent them, I will control the units, I will rent them for $1,600, $1,700, whatever we kind of decide. CMHC says, that's great. Now you qualify for 100 points of the MLI Select affordability category. Now you have to sign a 10-year attestation saying you're going to do that for 10 years or 20 years. And remember when I said 15 to 25% of the units, so 10 years, if you want to sign only 10 years, you will get, you have to give them 25% of the units. If you want to sign 20 years, it's a little bit better if you don't have that many basement suites because you only have to give them 15% of your units. And when I say 15%, we're talking square feet, usually not the number. So based on the square footage is how we have to go. So that's pretty much how to qualify under affordability for MLI Select. I'm sure there's going to be questions here, so I'm very excited to answer them later. But that's pretty much just touching on the exterior of this. Regarding energy efficiency, I wanted to touch on that just because there is a great example to use here, which MLI Select affordability works really great for brand new because you only have to give up 15 to 25% of the unit count. But for older buildings, now you have to qualify under affordability category, you have to give up 80%. So sometimes that doesn't work because, if you have a lot of 2 bedrooms in an older building, 80% of the units to be rented under 1735, you might be losing income now. So what we look at as an alternative, if the entire building is not just 1 bedrooms, is we say, okay, the energy program, especially in Alberta, might work great because if you're looking at an older building with a very old, say, you get a energy report that tells you if you change this boiler to this boiler, or if you change these windows to triple pane or double pane instead of these 40-year-old windows, you get an actual point system from where you started to where you end up, which could be is a lot cheaper than just building brand new. Because if you build brand new, you have to follow the federal energy code, and that can get really pricey. So that's a little difference between the affordability and the energy efficiency when it comes to new construction and the older buildings. And we can move on to the next slide, please. All right. So some of the items that we need to qualify for now, let's say you're interested in this MLI Select program, you found a piece of land or a property. So we'll talk in terms of a new construction. So if you're going to build it or somebody's going to build it for you, these are things that you're going to have to keep in mind when you're qualifying for this program. Number 1, personal net worth. It's the same for any CMHC program. It's 25% net worth of the loan amount. So if you borrow 2 million, you need to show positive 500,000. That's 25%. Now the 500,000 can be used from equity in your home, your rentals, cash in your bank, investments, these kind of things. I've even used shareholder loans because a lot of people say they'll build something and they'll put a lot of money in the build, but they'll lend from personal to their corporation. So these are all items that we can use to prove that 25% net worth. And another question I get in that area is that what if there's multiple borrowers? Yes, we can combine the net worth now just to prove that 25%, because ultimately your borrower is the building. You are just the guarantor, but we want to see how this building operates. So because we want to see how this building operates, we are going to order a bunch of third-party reports. Most important, your appraisal. Whether it's built or not, we go off the plans and we show an appraisal with an income approach. So the appraiser will do all the data, will tell you this is your property taxes, all your, the fire insurance, this is how much it will cost, and the income. So you can rent this unit for this range and the bottom units for that range. That's what CMHC and the mortgage broker, myself, will rely on to do your pro forma to tell you how much you can borrow against that building. Because your building is, and your purchase is only worth as much as it's producing in income. So very important to know what you're buying and what it's producing for revenue. Another report, environmental phase 1, that's standard for any CMHC properties that have 7 units or more. 5 and 6 units are exempt from that requirement. And then for new construction, if CMHC will participate in the construction financing, which they do, it's a different rate during construction. It's can be anywhere from prime minus to prime plus 1.5, depending on the loan amount. A lot of lenders these days are getting very specific and wanting 10 million plus for CMHC construction, but we funded 2 million to 3 million range with some begging to the lenders. So it is possible. It just depends on the time and how busy they are. So just keep that in mind if you want to go through that route. So a QS report is another report that will be required. So a QS report touches on a few things on your construction that will verify your budget, your quantity, make sure you don't have any crazy overruns by comparing market rates for lumber, for demolition, for a lot of things. So that's kind of a little bit about the construction process. And I think this could be my last item that I speak about before I run out of time. So everybody else has time to speak today. So for new purchases, it's pretty much the same process. The only thing is that you don't have to worry about, QS and the budget portion of it. So for investors that want to buy, you really just need to concentrate on what are you buying, what area, the appraisal, of course, and the income approach. That is the most important thing that will empower us to give you the loan amounts that you're going to be looking at. And finally, to kind of end this part, CMHC interest rates are great. They're amazing, and that's why this program is so good. We're funding loans around 4.5%. It is based on the Canadian mortgage bond, which changes every second. If you ask me, can I lock in your rate? I cannot lock in your rate at all, because we usually lock rates 4 days to 2 weeks before funding maximum. And that's when all the work is done. We're at the lawyers, you've signed, and we're just waiting to lock in the rate. So we're kind of at the mercy of the bond rate, but hopefully we kind of see a decline in that, as we've been seeing in the last 3-4 months. And I believe if we go over to the next slide, it will just verify that we will move on from financing for a little bit.
Thank you, Ahmed. That was really, really insightful. I even learned a lot. I was like jotting my own notes. So thank you for sharing all that information with us. That's awesome. And again, we'll have a Q&A towards the end or after all the speakers are done speaking here. Next up, we have Justin Warthe. He is the owner of New Builds Calgary. So Justin actually has 11 years on the selling side, selling real estate. But then also what's really cool about Justin's background is he actually has 18 years as a real estate investor. So he's been there, done that. He knows the ins and outs of how to make projects like that successful. And now he's able to layer the land component on top of that. And just a little braggy for Justin, he has done $500 million in sales volume with him and his team. So very successful and well reputed in our industry. So huge welcome to Justin.
Awesome. Thanks, Kathy. I appreciate it. Thanks for the beautiful intro. I appreciate it. And Ahmed, wow, what a lot of great information. I also learned a lot. And let me tell you from personal experience, I've been able to refer an abundance of clients to Ahmed to have them successfully finance and purchase multifamily through the MLI Select program. So I would not hesitate to refer or to use Ahmed for anything that you're looking to do MLI Select wise. So if we could go to the next slide, that would be great. Awesome. So what I'd like to quickly say is that right now we have current and upcoming projects available for investors that are looking to get into the MLI Select program. And you can get into this program for as little as $165,000 down payment. We didn't want to make this webinar salesy at all, and that's not what I'm trying to accomplish here. But the point I'm wanting to make is that you know, many people have accessibility to this program with little risk and little down payments. So that's something that I really want to make sure that we highlighted through this webinar. And if we could go to the next slide, please, that would be great. So in the industry, I get usually a call a day or so of people saying, hey, Justin, I need an RCG lot. I need an RCG corner lot, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, sorry, guys, the last one came on market and sold in about 35 seconds. So what we're starting to really focus on right now is a new zoning called HGO. HGO is basically a zoning where you can do 5 units or more on inner city lots now. So you could do an MLI Select program on a 50 by 120 inner lot. I know that Colin's going to speak a little bit later about this as well, about some exciting news about these lots in particular. And it's very interesting too, because a lot of the inside lots aren't quite as expensive as the exterior lots as well. So it makes your pro forma sometimes a lot more favorable. So that's something that I'd really like to stress for people to focus on, is looking for those land acquisitions of inner lots as well. So if we could go to the next slide, that would be awesome. So what is happening in Calgary real estate? As you know, Calgary's on a little bit more of a world stage right now of people saying, oh, Calgary, you know, Calgary's the place to be. It's still affordable. It's still, you know, you can still buy a house for less than 1.1 million, unlike other major Canadian cities. So a few statistics that I wanted to quickly share with everybody. Calgary metro area population just hit 1.64 million people, which is super exciting. I've heard from other sources that usually an economy is very sustainable when it hits 1.5 million. So now that we're at 1.6, I think that is very exciting for our city. Right now, the number of listings on the MLS system is only 1,651 listings, which is very, very light. The number of sales in the last 90 days alone is 4,971, with a rental increase in the last 12 months of 14.3%. Why am I talking about this? It's because in Calgary, we need more housing options. We need more affordable housing options. And that's why the CMHC MLI Select program is so attractive to investors. And not only to investors, but it also does our city a huge favor. So I think it's a really, really great initiative for us all to focus on as real estate investors moving forward. And don't quote me for this, but I believe right now, Calgary and again, don't quote me. I know we're on a Zoom call and that sort of thing, but I'm just saying this in my opinion. I think Calgary's on the ground floor, and in the next 3, 5, 7, 10 years, I think we're going to continue to see population growth, low amounts of inventory on the market, and prices increasing. So I think Calgary is a really, really great market for investors to focus. And if we could go to the next slide, that would be great. So as I mentioned earlier, we do have projects that investors can invest in, but there's also a really great opportunity for investors in Calgary to acquire their own land and partner with one of our builders to build out an MLI Select program for themselves. And so we've created a step-by-step guide for investors to do that as well. So step number 1 is basically making sure that you do your market research, getting your mortgage pre-approval, and getting a very high-level business plan with sound exit strategies in place. And what I mean by that is not necessarily just getting ready to finance one building. It's great to do 5, 10 units in one building. Don't get me wrong. However, I think it's really important to make sure that you have your numbers straight and speak with Ahmed about like, hey, Ahmed, what's my 1-year plan? What's my 2-year plan? What's my 5-year plan? What's my retirement strategy? So that we can set you up front and make sure that we get that success in line. Step number 2 is land acquisition. And it's important for you to partner with a real estate team that has access to both on and off market land acquisitions, because the ones that come to market are usually purchased very quickly. And so with off market land, there's a little bit less competition for investors as well. Step number 3 is land evaluation. So once you have it tied up, we would make sure that that land number makes a lot of sense in your pro forma, so that when you get through construction, that the cost of that asset, or the value of that asset, is all of what you paid for it and more, so that you can refinance, take some money out of it, and maybe build your next project with that equity. Next one is offer and negotiation. So we offer on the land and negotiate favorable price, possession, terms, etc. Sometimes focusing on things like possession are often even more important for an investor than even price, because time is money. And if it takes a little bit longer to take possession of that property, maybe they can tie loose ends up on another project, etc. So those are things that we would help you navigate as you go through the process as well. Step number 5 is finalize due diligence and financing if applicable. So going through the due diligence period, is it CMHC that's going to do your construction financing? Is Ahmed going to set you up with an A lender or a B lender? How are you going to finance that part of the project? And then when it's completed, are you going to do a mortgage takeout, or how are you going to structure that part of it as well, so they can make sure that the whole process is very seamless from start to finish as well. And then strategize for future land acquisitions as well. So, it would be too bad if you got to the end zone of this project and you're like, okay, now what? How am I going to finance my next project? So making sure that you have that strategy up front is also going to be very important. Step number 7 is rezoning. So as we spoke about earlier, HGO is a very popular new land use that came into play. I think it was 6 or 12 months ago or so. And basically, with that being said, if you could rezone from RC2 to HGO on a mid-block lot, that could be part of your strategy to build more doors for less dollars, and really increase your return on your investment. Step number 8 is to partner you with Bliss Home Designs in phase 1, so that they can put together a really great and compelling design on the land parcel that you purchased, making sure that we're looking at things like what's going to increase your highest rent, and all those sorts of things, and what makes sense for the area, and what's your exit strategy on the way out as well. Are you going to rent it for 10 years and then condominiumize and sell them one at a time? Or are you going to keep it for the long run, and just make sure that the design is in line with that plan? Step number 9 is to hire a builder. We have access to amazing builders in Calgary that have great quality, are backed by Alberta New Home Warranty, etc. and have amazing reputations in Calgary that we can partner you with. So once you have the land, you have the design, and then we'll partner you with the builder of your choice to make sure that the entire process is streamlined and efficient for you. Step number 10 is super exciting. You go through construction and you can go to site every single day and bug your builder if you want, and just take a look at the progress of that building as you go forward. Construction, depending on the builder, takes anywhere from 10 to 18 months. And then once that's completed, step 11 is lease up. So we can partner you with our in-house management company or any other manager of your choice. And basically you can work with them to lease up the building for the maximum rents possible, but still being able to stay in the realm of the affordability pillar with CMHC MLI Select.
Thank you, Justin. And yeah, that was actually, I really like that slide where it was like step by step, and because yeah, there are a lot of different moving parts. And I think that was like a really good snapshot just to show the entire process start to finish. And again, we just want to make sure that the whole audience has context of, where all the pieces fall into place and how they align with each other. So, okay, so next up we have Colin Showalter with Bliss Home Designs. Bliss Home Designs is an arm of Phase One Design. So Colin has 20 years in the construction industry, and he's very modest. That's his only points he gave me. But then he also has 10 years specifically in design, and he is our expert when it comes to the rezoning piece and understanding what can be actually built on a lot, and especially like with the HGO stuff, anybody looking to go down that road of HGO rezone or design, Colin is your guy. So Colin's going to talk about the design piece and the design and permits piece today.
Perfect. Thanks, Kathy. If you can go to the next slide, Diane. So the first thing from a design perspective is stay away from full custom design. And what exactly do I mean by that? Well, designing for an investment is much different than designing your custom dream home. And as we know, design drives the budget of the build overall. So some strategies to kind of stay away from full custom, as I called it, can keep construction methodology details simple but trendy. Too unique is hard to sell, and too cookie cutter is also hard to sell, right? No one wants to see that. Too unique is also hard or challenging to rent potentially. And then unique properties require unique designs. So what happens if you get too custom? I mean, sure, it's cool to have a rooftop pool or something, but is there going to be value there from an investor point of view? Probably not. So full custom design is going to add to your timelines, and it's also going to add a cost uncertainty, a degree of cost uncertainty to your project, right? So as an investor, from your point of view, what is important in a build itself? You want something that's buildable from like an efficiency point of view. You want something that is cost predictable for your pro forma calculations. You obviously want it to be rentable or sellable. It has to be attractive in order to be rentable and sellable, and it's got to fit within your timelines that you've built out within your pro forma. All right, next slide, please. All right, so the first thing is determining what your property can have built on it, basically. How many units can we get on this property? What is the maximum units for this particular site? Is it an RCG, HGO, MC1? What are the bylaws for this property? All of this stuff is good to know as part of your researching, in advance, and obviously as part of your investment calculations. So what can I build on this lot? How many units can I get on this lot? How much square footage is each unit going to be? How many parking stalls do I need? All of those things are going to be, important pieces of information to plug into your pro forma prior to, even pulling a trigger on a lot officially, right? Until it closes. Maybe the property you have is, as Justin mentioned earlier, it's an RC2 that has the potential to be rezoned to an HGO, which means you now can go from 2 units to 4 units above grade, right? Or 5 units above grade. And I mean, there's a lot of buzz in the media about a potential citywide rezone. I would recommend to anyone to kind of beat that rush to the gates to kind of get in for development permits and stuff. And even then, HGO is going to allow you to get an extra unit than any potential RCG rezone would get anyways. So there's still some lots, like Justin mentioned, that are going to be great candidates for rezones and likely at a more price attractive cost. And then, so once you determine how many kind of units you can get on this property, obviously the goal is to maximize the square unit or the square footage per unit as well on that lot. You know, some of the techniques in design are creating illusions of smaller spaces, more efficient spaces, we'll call them, exploring ways and design principles to make those spaces feel larger. I think these are all very important things when you're designing these more efficient structures. Things like the use of natural light, right? Well-placed windows, well-sized windows, skylights, you know, appropriately placed in certain areas. The use of natural light is going to make all of those spaces feel so much bigger than they actually are. And it's going to just kind of tie into the, you know, more rentable, more sellable, whatever the goal is there. Open floor plans in design. The big thing in these two is smart storage solutions. Having a good way to efficiently store extra stuff, because a lot of them don't have you know, a whole bunch of storage space, just because you're trying to maximize the livable square footage overall. And then another thing in design is strategic furniture placement. You know, it can be a great design. As soon as you put furniture in there, if it doesn't fit the right way and it seems goofy and it doesn't have you know, a thought to it, it's going to really make that space feel smaller than it actually is, right? All right, next slide, please. All right, so designing specifically for rental or for selling. Obviously, you know, like I said earlier, that is different than designing for a custom home. So I think the first piece is determining your target audience, the market focus. Who is living in this neighborhood? You know, differentiate. Are you intending to sell this? Are you intending to rent this? It's going to change the way you design the building itself based on its occupancy use and how you're going to use the building. Did you identify sort of your target market, right? Is it going to be younger families? Is it going to be multi-generational families? That's going to determine some things like, hey, how many bedrooms should be in this place? How many bathrooms do we need in this place? You know, what is the demographic of this neighborhood? What is the level of finish in this building going to be? All of those things are important to determine ahead of design so that you can kind of accurately build out that pro forma. The cool thing is in a lot of our designs for these inner city, we kind of have like a plug and play type thing where, you know, oh, this plan that you like, we can do 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, you know, 2 in a den, that kind of stuff, which allows it to be customized without being full custom, as we kind of mentioned earlier. A couple real life examples that I was recently involved in. I met with a property management company in their office last week, and we were kind of just going through some of the upcoming projects we're working on and that sort of stuff. And what we did is we just went on Rent Faster, and if you have an account there, you can kind of just run the numbers and you can kind of run reports on what the average rent rate is based on bedrooms and bathrooms and whatever. And you can drill down really as deep as you like. But what we did is we ran an analysis between a 2-bedroom fourplex in Killarney and a 3-bedroom fourplex in Killarney. And it was actually quite interesting is that the 2-bedroom fourplex in Killarney was getting a higher rental rate by about $400 a month than the 3 bedrooms were in Killarney, which was kind of interesting. So, I mean, in that neighborhood, people were prioritizing bigger rooms, bigger spaces over more rooms that are more efficient spaces, right? Then we ran the same sort of analysis in Bowness, and the 3 bedrooms were getting about $150 a month more than the 2 bedrooms were in Bowness. So it was kind of just an interesting little comparison there. But I think in general, it's good to understand those specifics before getting into design. It's a great way to ensure that your design is going to match your pro forma, is understanding what do you want it to look like. The other real life example that I have is in previous life, I was in a meeting with some Tim Hortons executives for one of their construction projects. And they basically said that in their revenue model, their #1 priority is getting those restaurants open as fast as humanly possible, because their average revenue in a store was $1 million a day. So each day there was a construction delay or whatever, that Tim Hortons store lost $1 million in revenue. So that's why it was just like, get that open as fast as possible. So to kind of summarize some of my points here is stay away from full custom design. Do something that's, somewhat predictable, understands the market, but still stays on trend and doesn't slide down the path of cookie cutter. I would encourage all attendees to sort of apply these principles to your own projects. Get your rental doors open as fast as you can, just like the Tim Hortons revenue model, I would say is the goal, right? Get renters in there as soon as possible. So that is the end of my portion, I believe.
That's great. Thank you, Colin. Thanks very much for that. Now we are going to shift to our Q&A portion of the presentation. And actually we have a ton of questions that came in. So I've just been kind of skimming through them in the background. We have one that I know Ahmed touched on just briefly, but there was multiple people that actually asked this. So I'm gonna do this one first. So Ahmed, how many projects could one company / borrower do at one time? Can they sell and start a new project? So I think that question has to do with more just like, the strategy to have multiple projects financed at once.
Yeah, so great question. So that's when the personal net worth is going to come in. So you can do as many projects as you want. There's no restriction on the projects. You'll need obviously a cash injection for the equity portion for any construction project that you do, because most of the projects, like I said, if it's below 10 million, we will be doing construction elsewhere or with CMHC. In both scenarios, you'll need an equity injection in your project. So that's number one. Number two is the net worth. If you're doing multiple projects, your net worth requirement will increase. You can't use the same net worth requirement for 4 projects. So if you're borrowing 6 million in total, not just $1.5 million on one, you need 25% net worth of whatever loan amount you're doing at the same time. So that is the tricky part when you're doing multiple projects at the same time with CMHC, because then the net worth requirement will increase. So that's pretty much it. So yes, but with some restrictions or items we need to solve.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Ahmed. On to the next question. Colin, how many units can we get on a mid-block 50-foot lot?
Well, that really depends on the zoning, on what the zoning of that lot is. I mean, if it's an RC2, you're going to get 2 units up and 2 units down. If it's an HCO, you can get 5 up and 5 down. If it's an RCG, you can do 4 up, 4 down. So it really depends on the zoning specifically to that property.
Okay, awesome. The next one, Justin, this one's for you. So just understanding the market right now, how do I reduce my risk and make money as an investor, just knowing that, it's kind of all over the place right now?
Yeah, very, very good question. I would say one thing that you could do as a real estate investor to reduce your risk is to certainly leverage the MLI Select program for sure. Obviously, what we're here to talk about. And the reason for that is because it comes with very little downside. With being able to put 5% down, 50-year amortization, little amount of money out of your pocket each month, if any, all of those sorts of things I think are great. Another thing to really keep in mind is to go into every single project overcapitalized. There's a lot of first-time investors that go into a real estate investment completely undercapitalized, and just because you only have to put 5% down, it's always good to have some reserve aside in case of things happening that are unexpected. So really making sure that that's in line as well is important. But it's also important for us all to kind of get a feel for where we're at in the market. Yes, Calgary's in a great place. Canada is obviously very volatile. The world is very volatile. So, making sure that you are over secure is going to be very important.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. Okay, I'm going to combine a couple of these questions here. Ahmed, these ones are for you. It has to do with the 10-year window that you talked about. So what happens if you sell the property before 10 years? And what would be an example of a 10-year exit? Like, for example, can it be sold as single units?
Yeah, so when you, there's two things that lock you in with CMHC. There's the 5 or 10-year fixed rate that you sign. Those cannot be broken at all or paid down. And then the 10-year or 20-year attestation you sign for affordability with CMHC. Now, at the end of the 5 or 10-year fixed rate, you can do whatever you want. If you sell the property or anything like that, you can sell them as single units if you want. Now, keep in mind, if you don't get new home warranty during the build, you are not allowed to touch title for 10 years, as in condominiumize it. If you get new home warranty, you're allowed to. So back to the 5-year, 10-year fixed, you're not allowed to do anything in between that. But yes, you can sell it as long as someone assumes the conditions that you got approved on. So basically, you start your mortgage, you have your interest rate, and they assume the mortgage as is, under everything you agreed on, including the affordability 10 or 20 year that you signed, and they take it over as long as they qualify under the personal net worth. That's how most CMHC products are sold. Otherwise, you are, if you're going to sign a contract with CMHC for affordability, or if you're in the middle of a fixed rate, you can only sell it by having someone else assume the product.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Ahmed. This next question is for Justin again. I cannot find land right now. What can I do? What are some tips and tricks, strategies?
Yeah, really good question. Everybody's having the same problem in today's market. As we talked about earlier, 16 or 1700 total listings on the market, very, very low supply, very tight market, very, very difficult for people to find not only listings, but especially land. For instance, there was a 50-foot lot that came on the market today in North Glenmore Park, and it's just been bonkers. So what we really need to focus on is finding land that other people don't know about. So you have to find a realtor to align with that has access to off-market land. And for instance, our team goes door knocking every single week to acquire off-market land for our investors and our builders. So it's really, really important that you're able to find access to land that everybody else isn't competing for.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Just going through the list here. Oh, someone is just, I think, having issues with the QR code. Yeah, so the QR code is just for the strategy session. Can you explain what the QR code is for? So the QR code is actually a strategy session where we would actually sit down. Anyone on the panel could sit down with you and just talk about your specific situation and answer any specific questions that you may have as well. Okay, let's just see. How long does it take for the CMHC approval, Ahmed?
So CMHC has been very fun to deal with because at the end, if you asked me this at the end of last year, I would have told you 6 months. If you ask me in January, it was 10 days. So it depends on the time of the year. That's again, when we already have ordered all our reports and ready to submit, which alone can take 2 months of preparation in the back end. Now, when we submit CMHC, sometimes it takes, like I said, they prioritize purchases and construction takeouts. So 10 days to these days, 2.5 months. Once CMHC picks up the file, it's approved immediately. I've got it the same day, a COI, which is a certificate of insurance. Then I take that to the lender, and that process can take about a month because the lender will have to engage a third-party fire insurance company that takes 2 weeks to do all this, and the lawyers take 2 weeks. And so there's a lot of paperwork. So from front to end, the fastest that this can happen is probably 3 months to 6 months.
Thank you, Ahmed. The next question, I think, Colin, you might be the best one to answer this one. Just with regards to the HGO, so the lots that Justin were talking about for HGO, can you elaborate on the time frame and process for rezoning to HGO?
Yeah, I've seen a couple questions that are similar in here. So the city of Calgary typically has about a 4 to 6 month time frame on a rezone for any property. And what we find is the HGOs typically are on the shorter end of that spectrum because the lots specifically have already been identified by the city. So there's kind of less debates of which one are HGO eligible and whatnot. So the process seems to be a little more streamlined on that. I saw one other question, Kathy, a couple times. I just wanted to answer quickly on the zoning stuff. Two people have asked, should they be looking for RC1 corner lots with the anticipated RCG rezone? I would just say in general on the rezone side of that, someone said the words anticipated rezone. I would say proposed rezone at this moment until something is official. It's a fairly risky bet to financially commit to something until we know exactly what the outcome is going to be. So
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. This one right here. I think this one would be for you, Ahmed. How does CMHC audit that in fact you are renting some units for below market value?
So besides the attestation that you sign, there are annual requirements for reporting to CMHC. So every year they're going to ask you for these items, and that's how they audit you. They'll ask you for a copy of the rent roll. They'll ask you sometimes for a copy of your lease agreements, but not necessarily. It's usually the rent roll. They'll ask you for the income and expense sheet that you've been keeping for the entire year. What's your revenue? What's your actual expenses? They'll ask you for a copy of your fire insurance up to date and property taxes up to date. And finally, this is the key of how they catch you, is they ask you for a copy of your financial statements for that property, because usually you're using a holding company to hold the asset. Now, it gets obviously complicated if you have 10 properties owned by the same financial statements, but if you have one property owning that, or one company that owns that property, it'll be very clear what your revenue is because it's only one company owning one building. So that is how they audit you.
Okay, awesome. Don't get audited. Yeah, so do we use CMHC financing to buy the property and do the build, or do we find other financing at the beginning when we find the lot and then move over to CMHC afterwards?
Yeah, so CMHC won't touch anything in the beginning anyways, because you're not ready. Like I said, when we submit to CMHC, they rely on brokers like myself. We are direct correspondents to CMHC. We've had this approval for 10 years. It's not given to everybody. So what that means is that don't send us anything. That's CMHC talking. Don't send us anything until you have every single report, all your underwriting. If you're building something, your development permit approved, not draft. So basically the entirety of the package. So when you buy land, you're obviously not there at all, right? And most people are not going to give you 9 months for closing. So if you need to rezone, there are other ways that we finance land, either private or through the bank. So anywhere between 20 to 35% down. We call it a rental property in the meantime. So before you demolish, you do all your soft costs, and you engage, Colin or Kathy, so you guys can get all your architectural drawings done. And then once we're ready, we go to CMHC. So there's a transition obviously before then.
Okay, awesome. Justin, can you talk a little bit more about the exit strategies and how do you decide which ones to use?
Yeah. So I would say it's important to analyze what your exit strategy is going to be before you get involved in a project. And so what I mean by that is, like, is your end game going to be to rent it for 10 years and then condominiumize and sell them individually? Is your plan to build out the project and sell it as a whole project to an investor, or that sort of thing? And always making sure that you have a plan B in place as well in case plan A doesn't pan out. And so I think it's really, really important to look at things and dial in a pro forma at the start of your project to make sure that you know exactly what you're going to be left with after your 1, 2, 5, 10-year plan. If it were me, what I would do is I'd have a plan to build the project, rent it for the first 10 years, and then analyze the market from there. So has the market increased 30 points and is it time to sell? Or is it important to keep paying down that lower interest mortgage? So those are just some things to consider.
Okay, awesome. This next question is for Colin. Colin, if we spec up the finishes, will we get more rent?
Yeah, there was 2 questions I saw about rent. I mean, that's going to be part of your analysis. I think in general, the nicer the building looks, the nicer, the more rent it's going to command. But there's obviously kind of a tipping point where that doesn't hold true anymore. That's got to be part of your market research, because that's going to depend on the neighborhood and the demographic and all that kind of stuff. And the same question is, do more bedrooms usually mean more rent? Sort of the case study I gave, Bowness versus Killarney, sometimes yes, sometimes no. So it's really case specific.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. After the completion of the first project, will the valuation of the first project help in the financing of the second deal?
I guess that one is for me.
Oh yeah, yes.
So basically, yes and no. They're mostly looking for personal net worth. Yes, we have top the personal net worth from equity in other properties that are owned corporately or financed with CMHC. But if you're already financing this property at the maximum 95% loan to value, they will not consider anything above 95%. If you finance it at 60% and their requirement is 95%, they're going to consider equity as part of your net worth from 60 to 95%. But over 95, that's their risk tolerance. They're not going to take anything above that and add it to your personal net worth. So again, depends how much you have financed against the property. Ideally, no, but we have used it in the past, yes.
And sorry, Ahmed, did you just say, because we just had another question come in. So yes. Will the first project help by increasing the personal net worth?
So the personal net worth is liquid assets and equity in property. So if the property is, again, worth 3 million, but you have 2,850,000 mortgage against it, there is no net worth in that property, because that 150,000 is your requirement to have it in there to get the mortgage in the first place. So they're not gonna consider it. But like I said, if you have a mortgage of 2 million against a property that's worth 3 million, then yes, we can consider 850 as part of your net worth in that property as equity.
Can I quickly add to that question as well, Ahmed, if that's okay?
Of course.
Okay, so picture this this for a second. So say an investor decides to purchase a piece of land for say $800,000, and then they build say an 8-plex on that parcel of land for say 1.8. So they're into it for say 2.6, right? And then say the bank finances it at a value of say 3.2. Would that 3.2 minus 2.6 add to your net worth statement?
Yeah, so again, if you're building it, right, you're already creating equity, because in essence, builders build things that are worth more at the end than what they built it for, right? So, your budget is one thing. That's why it's called loan to cost, and loan to value is what we'll look at for personal net worth. Loan to cost is what the bank will look at to finance you, but really it's the value at the end. You're right. If it's worth 3.2, then you created that value, right? That is your profit, but you're choosing to keep that product. So yeah, 100% based on the value, not what you spent to build it.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. We're actually out of time now, so that hour went by so fast. So just a huge shout out again to each and every single one of our panelists, Justin, Ahmed, and Colin. And thank you to all of the attendees of tonight's webinar. That was great to have you join us. And behind the scenes, I also want to give a shout out to Diane Beltran with Phase One Design, who did all the technology driving behind the scenes. So thank you, Diane, for all your help. If anybody has any other, can you go back to that last slide there, Diane, please?
And Kathy, I just want to quickly say thank you to you as well for being such a great moderator. So thanks.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, so, and then I know there was a few questions that weren't quite answered that were kind of a little bit more specific. So feel free, if you actually scan that QR code, it'll just take you to like a little booking link. You can just book like a quick like one-on-one Zoom with someone from our team, where we're more than happy to, you know, continue the conversations. Thank you again to everybody. And just want to let everybody know, save the date for March the 5th. We are actually going to be hosting another webinar, and that one we are actually going to be deep diving into those steps that Justin had outlined in order to do a project from the very start to the very end. So we're going to deep dive into that process and how to do that specifically. So thank you again for everybody, and have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.